Yeah, that uniform doesn't belong on someone like you.
Victoria Blackwood's voice cut through the Premier Services Lounge like a blade, her designer burgundy dress catching the fluorescent lights as she stepped between Captain Maya Thompson and the check-in counter. Security should escort you out before you embarrass yourself further. Maya Thompson stood motionless in her crisp Pinnacle Airways uniform, 4 gold captain stripes gleaming on her shoulders, but Victoria saw only skin color. Around them, the Atlanta International Airport terminal buzzed with afternoon energy. Business travelers hurried past with rolling luggage. Families gathered near departure boards, and in the background, conversations slowly died as passengers turned to watch the confrontation unfolding. In exactly 30 minutes, CEO Michael Harrison would walk through those same glass doors and call Maya by name in front of everyone. Victoria Blackwood had no idea she'd just declared war on his personal protégé. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd flown through Category 5 hurricanes. She'd landed damaged aircraft when engines failed over the Atlantic. She'd saved hundreds of lives in situations that would have broken lesser pilots. But standing here being questioned by someone who probably couldn't tell a wing from a windshield, this felt like the hardest flight of her life. Ma'am, Maya said, her voice steady with the practiced calm of someone accustomed to crisis management. I'm Captain Maya Thompson. I'm checking in for my positioning flight to Los Angeles. Victoria's perfectly manicured eyebrow arched. Her diamond tennis bracelet sparkled as she crossed her arms. Captain. She let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark. Honey, I've been flying first class for 20 years. I know what real pilots look like. Her eyes swept over Maya from head to toe with undisguised contempt. They don't look like you. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Other passengers had stopped pretending not to listen. A businessman in a $1,000 suit lowered his newspaper. A family with young children glanced over nervously. Even the check-in agent, a young Hispanic woman whose name tag read Carmen Rodriguez, looked up from her computer screen with growing uncertainty. Maya had faced this before. The sideways glances, the whispered questions about diversity hiring, the passengers who asked if she was really qualified to fly the plane, but never this openly, never this publicly, never with such vicious certainty. I assure you, Maya replied, sliding her FAA commercial pilot's license and airline ID across the marble counter, my credentials are completely authentic. Victoria stepped closer, her expensive perfume mingling with the airport's blend of coffee and jet fuel. Anyone can fake documents these days. I've read about this online. People buying pilot uniforms pretending to be crew members to get upgrades and special treatment. She turned to Carmen. You need to verify this very carefully. I don't feel safe with someone like this having access to aircraft. Carmen Rodriguez picked up Maya's credentials with trembling fingers. She'd been working for Pinnacle Airways for 3 years. She'd seen thousands of pilots check in. Maya's documents looked identical to every other captain's license she'd processed. But Victoria Blackwood was a platinum-level frequent flyer. She had influence. She had connections. She had the kind of authority that could end careers. I'll need to run additional verification, Carmen said quietly, not meeting Maya's eyes. Maya felt the familiar coil of anger tighten in her stomach. She suppressed it with years of practice. In her position, showing anger was seen as aggression. Raising her voice would be called unprofessional. Defending herself too vigorously would be labeled as having an attitude. She was trapped in a cage of expectations that demanded perfection while questioning her right to be there at all. Of course, Maya said, her voice perfectly controlled. Take all the time you need. Victoria smiled with satisfaction. It wasn't a warm expression. It was the predatory grin of someone who just cornered their prey. Smart girl. Much better to cooperate now before this gets out of hand. Maya Thompson had fought for every stripe on her shoulders. Born in Detroit to a single mother who cleaned office buildings at night so her daughter could attend school during the day, Maya learned early that success wasn't inherited. It was earned through relentless dedication and refusing to accept limitations others tried to impose. At 8 years old, Maya pressed her face against the chain-link fence at Detroit Metro Airport, watching planes climb into the sky. While other children dreamed of becoming movie stars or pop singers, Maya dreamed of commanding those massive machines. Her mother, Sandra Thompson, worked 3 jobs to pay for Maya's flight lessons. She never complained about the double shifts or the exhaustion. She just smiled when Maya talked about flying and said, "Baby, if God wanted to keep us on the ground, He wouldn't have given us dreams." Maya's path to the cockpit was steeper than most. Community college for her aviation degree while working part-time at the airport fueling aircraft. Military service flying cargo planes over Afghanistan and Iraq. Commercial training on borrowed money and scholarship programs. Each step forward earned through merit, not privilege. Each barrier broken through skill, not connections. At 27, she'd been randomly selected for additional screening 15 times in 1 month, each time while wearing her uniform, each time questioned about her credentials by security personnel who seemed genuinely surprised that a young black woman could be a commercial pilot. The final incident had occurred when she was denied crew lounge access during a 6-hour layover, forced to sleep on uncomfortable terminal benches, while white pilots rested in leather chairs behind locked doors. That night she'd called then Vice President Michael Harrison, who'd recently been promoted from the pilot ranks to corporate management. Her voice had been steady despite the pain when she'd said, "Sir, I won't let another pilot endure this humiliation. Not on our airline. We're better than this." Harrison had listened. More importantly, he'd acted. New protocols were implemented. Training was enhanced. And Maya became his unofficial advisor on crew relations and equality issues. Now 12 years with Pinnacle Airways later, Captain Maya Thompson commanded international routes and trained new pilots. She'd logged over 15,000 flight hours. She'd saved 280 passengers during a severe thunderstorm over the Atlantic Ocean landing safely when 3 other flights had to divert. She'd been featured on the cover of Aviation Weekly. She'd received commendations from the FAA for exceptional airmanship. But standing at this check-in counter, none of that mattered to Victoria Blackwood. Victoria Elena Blackwood had never wanted for anything in her 42 years. Born to old Charleston money, married to investment banker Marcus Blackwood, she moved through the world with the unshakable confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Her burgundy silk dress cost more than most people earned in a month. Her diamond jewelry caught light from every angle. Her platinum airline status ensured she was treated with deference wherever she traveled. Victoria had opinions about everything and the resources to make those opinions heard. She served on charity boards not out of compassion, but because it looked good in society photos. She donated to causes that enhanced her reputation. She believed in order hierarchy and keeping people in what she considered their proper places. The idea that someone like Maya Thompson could hold the same authority as the white male pilots she was accustomed to seeing challenged her fundamental worldview. Carmen Rodriguez watched the tension building with growing anxiety. At 26, she was supporting her elderly parents and 2 younger siblings on her Pinnacle Airways salary. She couldn't afford to lose this job. She couldn't afford to make mistakes. But she was caught between following proper procedures and placating an influential passenger who clearly expected her to find something wrong with Maya's credentials. Carmen had processed hundreds of pilot check-ins. She knew what authentic documents looked like. Maya's FAA license, airline ID, and medical certificate were all legitimate. The photo matched. The stamps were correct. The expiration dates were current. There was absolutely nothing suspicious about the paperwork. But Victoria Blackwood stood there expecting her to find problems that didn't exist. Ma'am, Carmen said, carefully addressing Victoria while holding Maya's credentials, "These documents appear to be in order." Victoria's expression hardened. Appear to be. She leaned across the counter, her voice dropping to a stage whisper designed to carry to nearby passengers. Honey, I've seen these fake documents before. They're getting very sophisticated. You need to run this through additional verification channels. Call your supervisor. Check the federal databases. Do whatever you have to do to make sure this woman is actually authorized to be in a cockpit. Maya's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the handle of her flight bag. Ms. she began. Blackwood. Victoria Blackwood. I'm sure your supervisor will recognize the name. Victoria's tone suggested this should mean something significant. My husband Marcus sits on several airline industry boards. We're what you might call industry insiders. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that this situation requires additional scrutiny. The implication was clear. Carmen's job could be affected by how she handled this interaction. Victoria Blackwood had connections. She had influence. She had the power to make complaints that would be taken seriously by corporate management. I understand your concerns, Maya said, her pilot training keeping her voice level despite the insult. Perhaps you'd like to speak with the duty manager while Ms. Rodriguez processes my check-in. Oh, I'll definitely be speaking with management, Victoria replied, her smile sharp as broken glass. This entire situation is completely unacceptable. I pay premium prices to fly with this airline because I expect a certain level of authenticity. When that's compromised, everyone needs to know about it. Other passengers were definitely watching now. A businessman in an expensive suit had pulled out his phone. A retired couple whispered to each other while stealing glances at the confrontation. A family with young children looked uncomfortable but couldn't seem to look away. The situation was becoming a public spectacle. Carmen's supervisor, Brad Mitchell, approached the counter after being summoned by another agent who'd noticed the commotion. Brad was 38, with 8 years of company experience and a tendency to avoid conflict whenever possible. He particularly disliked situations that could reflect poorly on the airline's customer service ratings. Good afternoon, Brad, said, his smile automatic and practiced. I'm Brad Mitchell, the duty supervisor. I understand there's some concern about documentation. Victoria turned her full attention to him like a laser focusing. Yes, there certainly is. This woman is attempting to check in with what I believe are fraudulent credentials. She's claiming to be a pilot, but frankly, that's obviously impossible. I'm requesting additional verification before this goes any further. Brad looked at Maya's uniform, her credentials, her professional demeanor. He looked at Victoria's expensive clothes, her confident posture, her expectant expression. In his experience, problems usually came from difficult passengers, not from crew members. But Victoria Blackwood looked like someone who could cause significant problems, if not handled carefully. Well, he said slowly, we can certainly run additional verification if there are specific concerns about the documentation. Maya felt the situation slipping away from rationality. Sir, I'm Captain Thompson. I've been flying for this company for 12 years. My employee number is 47291. You can verify my status with crew scheduling, with flight operations, or with any supervisor in the pilot department. This is a routine positioning flight that I've made hundreds of times before. Brad nodded non-committally. I'm sure we can sort this out quickly. Carmen, please run a full verification through all available channels. What should have taken 2 minutes was now stretching toward 10. Other passengers in the Premier Services line were becoming impatient, but nobody complained about the delay. They were too interested in watching the drama unfold. Victoria stepped back, slightly satisfied that she'd successfully planted doubt about Maya's legitimacy. Thank you for taking this seriously, she said to Brad. Airline security is everyone's responsibility. We simply cannot be too careful these days. Maya stood perfectly still, maintaining her professional composure, while inside a storm of frustration and anger built pressure. She'd been accused of fraud. Her credentials had been questioned. Her competence had been challenged, and all of it was happening in public in front of passengers who would remember this scene every time they saw a black pilot. The clock on the terminal wall now showed 2:58 p.m. Her flight departed in 77 minutes, but this delay was about much more than making a connection. This was about whether someone like Victoria Blackwood could use privilege and prejudice to humiliate someone like Maya Thompson simply because she didn't fit expectations about what a pilot should look like. Carmen's fingers moved reluctantly across her keyboard, running unnecessary searches through databases that would only confirm what she already knew, that Captain Maya Thompson was exactly who she claimed to be. The verification process that should have taken 30 seconds stretched into its 7th minute as Carmen Rodriguez repeatedly searched databases that kept confirming the same information. Maya Thompson was a legitimate Pinnacle Airways captain. Her credentials were authentic. Her status was current. Her record was impeccable. But Victoria Blackwood stood there with arms crossed and eyebrows raised, radiating an expectation that something suspicious would eventually be discovered. More passengers had gathered around the Premier Services counter. What started as casual curiosity was becoming focused attention as the delay stretched on and tensions escalated. The crowd formed a loose semicircle around the confrontation, creating an impromptu theater where Maya Thompson's professional reputation was being put on trial. James Rodriguez, a 45-year-old project manager from Phoenix, stood near the back of the crowd with his phone discreetly recording. He'd been a frequent flyer for 20 years and had seen his share of airport drama, but this felt different. This felt wrong. When he heard Victoria question Maya's credentials based purely on appearance, something clicked. He'd experienced workplace discrimination himself and recognized the patterns. "This is unbelievable," he whispered to his wife, keeping his phone steady. "They're questioning a pilot's credentials because of her race." Lisa Parker, a 52-year-old retired teacher from Baltimore, had been waiting in the adjacent first-class line when the confrontation began. She'd spent 30 years in public education dealing with parents who questioned whether minority teachers were qualified to educate their children. She recognized institutional bias when she saw it. "Excuse me," Lisa said, stepping forward with the authoritative voice of someone accustomed to managing difficult situations. "I've been flying for 3 decades, and I've never seen a crew member's credentials questioned this extensively without cause. This is clearly discriminatory." Victoria whirled to face this new challenger. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. This is about flight safety and proper verification procedures." "Flight safety." Lisa's voice carried clearly across the terminal area. "I think what this is really about is someone who doesn't believe that black women can be airline captains." A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. Some passengers nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable with the direct confrontation. But the issue was now openly acknowledged rather than hidden behind euphemisms about verification procedures and additional scrutiny. Robert Martinez, a 29-year-old off-duty flight attendant heading home to Denver, pushed through the crowd when he heard the name Maya Thompson being questioned. He'd worked several flights with Captain Thompson over the past 2 years. He knew her reputation among crew members. He knew her skill level. He knew the respect she commanded from other pilots. "Wait a minute," Robert said loudly, his voice carrying across the terminal area. "Did someone just question Captain Thompson's credentials?" "Maya Thompson." He laughed with genuine disbelief. "Lady, you're questioning one of the best pilots in the entire Pinnacle fleet. She saved 280 passengers last year when everyone else would have diverted. She's probably logged more international hours than any other captain on the seniority list." Victoria's face flushed red. Whether from embarrassment or anger was unclear. "I don't care what you people claim. I can see what's obvious to anyone with eyes. This is diversity hiring gone too far, and it's compromising passenger safety." The mask was slipping. The polite concerns about verification procedures were giving way to raw prejudice expressed openly and without shame. Jennifer Walsh, Victoria's travel companion and longtime friend, finally spoke up in support. At 38, she shared Victoria's social circle and many of her attitudes. Victoria's absolutely right to be concerned. We've all read about these fake credential situations. The airline has a responsibility to verify everyone thoroughly, especially when something seems unusual. Unusual how challenged Lisa Parker her teacher's instincts engaging fully. What exactly seems unusual about a uniformed pilot presenting proper credentials? Jennifer's eyes darted around the crowd looking for support that wasn't materializing. Well, you know. It's just not what you typically expect to see. You mean it's not what you're used to seeing, corrected Robert Martinez. There's a difference. James Rodriguez continued live streaming the confrontation, his viewer count climbing as people shared the link. Comments were flowing in real time, most supporting Maya and condemning the discrimination they were witnessing. Carmen Rodriguez felt the situation spiraling beyond her control. She'd now verified Maya's credentials through 4 different databases. Every search returned the same information. Captain Maya Thompson, 12 years with Pinnacle Airways. Current medical certificate. Valid license. Exemplary safety record. There was literally nothing wrong with any of the documentation. Ma'am Carmen said quietly to Victoria, "I've run complete verification through all available channels. Captain Thompson's credentials are completely legitimate and current." Victoria's voice rose to a level that could be heard throughout the terminal area. "Then you're not looking hard enough. I want you to call the FAA. I want you to call corporate security. I want someone in authority to verify that this woman is actually qualified to operate commercial aircraft. Because I'm telling you right now, I will not board any plane that she's flying." Maya spoke for the first time in several minutes, her voice cutting through the noise with the command presence that made her effective in emergency situations. "Ma'am, you have every right to choose not to fly with any pilot you don't trust. However, you don't have the right to make false accusations about my qualifications or my credentials." False accusations. Victoria's voice reached a near shriek. "I'm protecting other passengers from potential fraud. This is exactly the kind of situation the TSA warns us about, people impersonating airline crew to gain access to secure areas or to get special treatment." Brad Mitchell had been watching the situation with growing discomfort. The crowd was getting larger. Phones were recording. Social media posts were being made in real time. This was becoming exactly the kind of public relations nightmare that corporate management would want to avoid. Perhaps he suggested weakly we could continue this discussion in a private office. "No," said Maya firmly. "If my qualifications are being questioned publicly, they can be verified publicly. I have nothing to hide." Lisa Parker nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right. If someone's going to make accusations, they should be prepared to have those accusations examined openly." The crowd was clearly divided into camps now. Maya had supporters who recognized discrimination when they saw it. Victoria had a few people who seemed to think additional verification was reasonable, even if they weren't willing to voice their opinions as openly. But the majority of observers appeared uncomfortable with Victoria's increasingly aggressive accusations. A gate agent from another counter approached Brad Mitchell. "Sir, we're getting complaints about the noise level, and there are people live streaming this situation. It might be going viral." Brad's anxiety spiked. Viral airport confrontations never ended well for anyone involved. "Carmen, how much longer for the verification process?" "It's complete, sir. All channels confirm that Captain Thompson's credentials are authentic and current." Victoria sensed the situation slipping away from her control. The crowd wasn't supporting her position. The verification process wasn't finding the problems she'd insisted must exist. Even her friend Jennifer was looking uncertain about continuing the confrontation. But Victoria Blackwood had never backed down from a fight in her life. Admitting she was wrong would mean acknowledging that her judgments were based on prejudice rather than legitimate concerns. It would mean accepting that someone she considered beneath her had earned achievements she could never match. I don't care what your databases say, she declared, her voice carrying across the terminal with absolute certainty. I know what I'm looking at, and what I'm looking at is obviously fraudulent. I want airport security called immediately. I want federal authorities notified, and I want this woman removed from the secure area before she has the opportunity to endanger any aircraft or passengers. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Victoria had just accused a decorated pilot of federal crimes in front of dozens of witnesses and multiple recording devices. Maya felt something cold settle in her stomach. This had moved beyond discrimination into character assassination, beyond questioning her credentials into attacking her integrity, beyond challenging her competence into threatening her freedom. Ma'am Maya said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of 15 years of professional aviation experience, "You have just accused me of impersonating a federal employee and attempting to gain unauthorized access to aircraft. Those are serious federal crimes. I hope you're prepared to substantiate those accusations with evidence." The terminal area fell silent except for the distant hum of aircraft engines and the soft beeping of gate equipment. Everyone present understood that they had just witnessed something significant. Lines had been crossed, accusations had been made, and there would be consequences for everyone involved. James Rodriguez's live stream had reached over 50,000 viewers. The hashtag pilot discrimination was beginning to trend on social media platforms. News outlets were starting to pick up the story from user posts and social media shares. In exactly 12 minutes, CEO Michael Harrison's phone would ring with urgent calls from corporate communications about a situation developing at Atlanta International Airport involving one of his pilots and a discrimination complaint that was rapidly going viral. But for now, in this moment, Maya Thompson stood alone against accusations that struck at the heart of everything she'd worked to achieve. Surrounded by strangers, defended by people she'd never met, and attacked by someone who'd judged her guilty of crimes she'd never committed. The battle for her reputation, her dignity, and her career was about to escalate beyond anything anyone in that terminal could have imagined. James Rodriguez's live stream viewer count exploded past 100,000 as word spread across social media platforms. His phone screen showed a constant stream of comments expressing outrage at what viewers were witnessing. The hashtag pilot discrimination was trending nationally, with users sharing the link and adding their own commentary about racial bias in aviation. "This is absolutely insane," James whispered to his phone camera while keeping it focused on the confrontation. "A qualified pilot is being accused of fraud simply because she doesn't look like what some people expect a pilot to look like." The comments section of his live stream filled with support for Maya and condemnation of Victoria's behavior. Viewers shared stories of their own experiences with discrimination. Others tagged news outlets and civil rights organizations. Several people identified themselves as Pinnacle Airways employees, expressing embarrassment at how their colleague was being treated. Lisa Parker had moved closer to the counter, positioning herself as Maya's unofficial advocate. Her 30 years in public education had taught her how to stand up to parents who questioned minority teachers' qualifications, and those skills were fully engaged now. "Young lady," she said firmly to Carmen, "how many more database searches are you planning to conduct? This pilot's credentials have been verified multiple times. At what point does additional verification become harassment?" Carmen looked helplessly between Lisa's pointed question and Victoria's expectant glare. The information confirmations are all positive. Captain Thompson's credentials are valid and current." Victoria stepped closer to the counter, her diamond bracelet catching the fluorescent lights as she gestured emphatically. "Then your processes are inadequate. I want federal verification. I want the FAA contacted directly. I want someone from corporate security to physically examine these documents because they are obviously fraudulent." Robert Martinez, the off-duty flight attendant, shook his head with visible frustration. "Lady, you're talking about Maya Thompson. She's been featured in Aviation Weekly magazine. She's received commendations from the FAA. She's saved more lives than most pilots see in their entire careers. And you're standing here accusing her of being a fraud. I don't care what magazines say, Victoria snapped back. I can see what's in front of me. This is exactly the kind of affirmative action hiring that's compromising safety standards across the industry. The crowd's reaction was immediate and negative. Several passengers audibly gasped at the openly racist language. Others shook their heads or made disapproving sounds. The polite pretense that this was about legitimate security concerns was completely abandoned now. Jennifer Walsh, Victoria's friend, tugged at her arm nervously. Victoria, maybe we should just go to our gate. Our flight board's in 40 minutes. Absolutely not, Victoria declared, shaking off Jennifer's hand. I'm not walking away from this until it's properly resolved. If this airline is going to allow unqualified individuals to impersonate crew members, then every passenger needs to know about it. Maya's radio crackled with routine air traffic control chatter from the nearby gates. The familiar sounds of her professional world seemed distant, now separated from this terminal confrontation by an invisible barrier of accusation and suspicion. She thought about the other pilots who were probably monitoring the situation through crew communications networks. Her reputation was being attacked in the most public way possible. Ma'am, Maya said, addressing Victoria directly for the first time since the confrontation escalated, I want to make sure I understand your position clearly. You believe that my FAA commercial pilot's license is fraudulent. You believe that my airline identification is fake. You believe that my uniform is a costume and that I'm impersonating a federal employee. Is that an accurate summary of your accusations? Victoria raised her chin defiantly. That's exactly what I believe. And I'm not the only one. Anyone with common sense can see that something is seriously wrong with this situation. Then I assume you're prepared to repeat those accusations to federal investigators. Maya's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath the professional calm. Because impersonating a pilot is a federal crime. If you're correct, then I should be arrested and prosecuted. But if you're wrong, then you've just committed slander against a federal employee in front of dozens of witnesses. For the first time since the confrontation began, Victoria looked uncertain. The legal implications of her accusations were becoming clear, and the crowd of witnesses was definitely not supporting her position. Brad Mitchell, the duty supervisor, was receiving updates from other agents about the growing social media attention. His manager had just called asking about reports of a viral video being filmed at their counter. Corporate communications was aware of the situation. Security was monitoring developments. Ms. Blackwood, he said carefully, perhaps we could have Captain Thompson present additional identification while we contact the appropriate authorities for verification. I've already presented my license, my airline ID, my medical certificate, and my crew badge. Maya responded. What additional identification would you like to see? Lisa Parker interjected before Brad could respond. How many pieces of identification does your airline typically require from crew members? Because this seems excessive. Carmen spoke up quietly. Normally, just the license and airline ID. Captain Thompson has presented everything required and more. Victoria's frustration was boiling over into rage. Fine. Since no one here is willing to do their job properly, I'll handle this myself. She pulled out her phone and began dialing. I'm calling airport security. I'm calling the FAA. I'm calling whoever I need to call to get this fraud stopped before someone gets hurt. Maya watched Victoria make her calls with the same calm she brought to emergency situations. But inside, she felt the familiar weight of being judged by different standards. White pilots who made mistakes were given second chances. Black pilots who made mistakes were held up as examples of why diversity hiring was dangerous. Now she wasn't even being accused of making mistakes. She was being accused of not deserving to be in the cockpit at all. James Rodriguez's live stream comments were flowing so fast he couldn't read them all. Viewers were tagging major news outlets, civil rights organizations, and Pinnacle Airways official social media accounts. Screenshots of Victoria's accusations were being shared widely, along with Maya's professional response and the obvious bias displayed in the confrontation. "The whole world is watching this," someone in the crowd muttered. "Good," replied Lisa Parker. "Sunlight is the best disinfectant for this kind of behavior." Airport security officers were now approaching the Premier Services area called by Victoria's complaints, and also by Brad Mitchell's request for assistance managing the growing crowd and potential public relations crisis. "Airport police are en route," announced one of the security officers. "Everyone needs to remain calm while we sort this situation out." Victoria smiled with satisfaction. Finally, someone with authority is taking this seriously. Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with high-stress situations, but this wasn't weather-related turbulence or mechanical problems she could handle with training and skill. This was character assassination based on prejudice witnessed by hundreds of people in person and thousands more online. Robert Martinez stepped closer to Maya. "Captain, I want you to know that the entire cabin crew community supports you. Everyone knows your reputation. Everyone knows your skill level. This is complete nonsense." "Thank you," Maya replied quietly. "I appreciate that more than you know." The security officers began asking questions about the nature of the complaint and the cause of the disturbance. Victoria immediately launched into her accusations about fraudulent credentials and impersonation of airline crew. Maya presented her documentation once again for official examination. But while the security officers were reviewing the situation, something significant was happening in the corporate offices of Pinnacle Airways. Michael Harrison, CEO for 3 years and former pilot himself, was receiving urgent phone calls about a viral video involving one of his captains being accused of fraud at Atlanta International Airport. When his assistant read him the name Captain Maya Thompson, Michael Harrison's expression changed immediately. Maya Thompson wasn't just any pilot. She was his former student, his protege, the person he trusted with his own family when they flew. The woman who'd called him years ago about discrimination and helped him understand problems he'd never experienced personally. Michael Harrison was already reaching for his car keys. The battle for Maya Thompson's dignity was about to shift dramatically. The security officers spent 12 minutes reviewing Maya's credentials, cross-referencing her information with federal databases, and taking statements from witnesses. Every verification came back positive. Captain Maya Thompson was exactly who she claimed to be. Her license was authentic, her employment was current, her record was exemplary. But Victoria Blackwood refused to accept these findings. "Your databases are obviously compromised," she insisted to the lead security officer. "Or you're not checking the right channels. I know what I'm looking at, and this woman is clearly impersonating a pilot." The crowd around the Premier Services counter had grown to over 40 people. Airport workers from other areas had found reasons to walk past and observe the confrontation. Gate agents whispered among themselves. Even passengers from distant terminals were arriving, drawn by social media posts about the unfolding drama. James Rodriguez's live stream had reached nearly 300,000 viewers. Major news outlets were beginning to pick up the story from social media. The hashtag Justice for Captain Maya was trending alongside pilot discrimination. Comment sections filled with support for Maya and condemnation of the obvious bias she was facing. Lisa Parker stood near Maya, having appointed herself an unofficial advocate. "Officer, how many times does this woman need to prove she's qualified to do her job? This is clearly discriminatory harassment at this point." "Ma'am, we're following proper procedures," the security officer replied diplomatically. "All verification checks are coming back positive. The credentials appear to be completely legitimate." Victoria's voice rose to near-shriek levels. "Appear to be? That's not good enough. I want federal agents called in. I want someone with real authority to examine these documents because local airport security is obviously not competent to handle this situation." Maya maintained her professional composure, but inside she felt the weight of 15 years of facing these challenges. Every achievement questioned, every promotion scrutinized, every mistake magnified while her successes were minimized. She'd thought that reaching captain rank would end the constant need to prove herself. Instead, it had simply moved the battleground to more public spaces. Ma'am Maya said quietly to Victoria, "I want to ask you one direct question. If I were a white male pilot presenting the exact same credentials, would you be making these accusations?" Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. "Don't you dare try to make this about race. This is about qualification and safety, period." "Then answer the question," challenged Lisa Parker. "Would you be questioning a white male pilot this extensively?" Robert Martinez nodded agreement. "I've seen hundreds of pilots check in over the years. I've never seen anyone questioned this thoroughly without cause." Victoria turned to face the crowd that was clearly not supporting her position. "You people don't understand what's at stake here. This is about maintaining standards. This is about ensuring that positions are earned through merit, not handed out through quotas." The gasps from the crowd were audible. Victoria had just openly stated that she believed Maya hadn't earned her position through merit. The racist assumption was no longer hidden behind concerns about verification procedures. Carmen Rodriguez, who had been quietly processing the additional verification requests, finally spoke up with obvious discomfort. "Ma'am, I've now verified Captain Thompson's credentials through 7 different channels: federal databases, company records, FAA verification, TSA clearance programs. Everything comes back positive. There is absolutely nothing wrong with any of her documentation." Brad Mitchell nodded nervously. "All verifications are complete and positive. Captain Thompson's status is current and legitimate." Victoria's friend Jennifer had been growing increasingly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Victoria, maybe we should just go to our gate. This has gone far enough." "No," Victoria snapped. "I'm not backing down from this. If this airline wants to compromise safety through diversity hiring, then the flying public needs to know about it." That was the moment when a voice cut through the terminal noise like a blade through silk. "Maya." Every head turned. Conversations stopped. Even the ambient airport noise seemed to pause as CEO Michael Harrison strode through the terminal corridor with the focused intensity of a man on a mission. He was flanked by corporate security officers and members of his executive team, but his attention was locked on the crowd around the Premier Services counter. His expression was thunderous. His pace was purposeful. His presence commanded immediate attention from everyone within 50 yards. Victoria Blackwood's face drained of color as she recognized the man approaching. She'd seen him in business magazines. She'd watched him in shareholder meeting videos. She knew that voice from corporate communications. Michael Harrison, CEO of Pinnacle Airways, was walking directly toward their confrontation. "Captain Thompson," Michael said as he reached the counter, his voice carrying across the terminal with executive authority. "I just received multiple calls that someone was questioning your credentials." His eyes locked on Victoria like a targeting mechanism acquiring its objective. Someone was foolish enough to call my finest pilot a fraud. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the PA announcement seemed to pause. Hundreds of people in the terminal area had stopped their activities to watch this unprecedented scene unfold. Maya felt relief flood through her for the first time in an hour. "Mr. Harrison, there seems to be some confusion about my qualifications." "Confusion?" Michael's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt louder than shouting. "There's no confusion about your qualifications, Captain. You have more international flight hours than any pilot in our fleet. You've received commendations from the FAA for exceptional airmanship. You saved 280 passengers when 3 other flights had to divert to alternate airports." He turned to Victoria. "You question someone who's forgotten more about aviation than most people will ever know." Victoria stammered. "Sir, I was just concerned about passenger safety." "Safety." Michael's voice carried to every corner of the terminal. "You questioned the woman who trained me to fly. Before I was CEO, I was a pilot, Captain Thompson was my instructor, my mentor. She taught me that aviation isn't about what you look like. It's about skill, precision, and the courage to hold 300 lives in your hands at 40,000 feet. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause. Phones captured every word. The live stream audience exploded past 500,000 viewers. Comments flooded in supporting Maya and celebrating this dramatic vindication. Brad Mitchell stepped forward, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mr. Harrison, sir, we were following standard verification procedures." "Standard?" Michael turned to him with laser focus. "Your standard is to humiliate a 12-year veteran, to waste her time with bureaucratic theater while passengers film discrimination in real time, to allow customers to make racist accusations without challenge." Robert Martinez called out from the crowd, "Mr. Harrison, Captain Thompson is one of the best pilots we have. Everyone in the crew community knows her reputation." Michael nodded to him. "Thank you, Robert. You're absolutely right." He addressed the crowd directly. "This woman has more integrity in her little finger than some people have in their entire bodies. She's saved more lives than most pilots will ever touch. She's earned every stripe on her shoulders through skill, dedication, and excellence." Victoria made one last, desperate attempt to justify her actions. "I was just trying to protect other passengers from potential fraud. These documents could have been faked." Michael's expression was ice cold. "Ms. Blackwood, isn't it? I know exactly who you are. Your husband Marcus has mentioned you in industry meetings." His voice dropped to a conversational tone that was somehow more intimidating than yelling. "You questioned someone who's earned achievements you couldn't imagine reaching. Someone whose calm professionalism in crisis situations has saved more lives than you'll ever touch." Jennifer Walsh tried to pull Victoria away from the confrontation. "Victoria, we really should go." "Your friend has the right idea," Michael said. "Because this conversation is over. Security will escort both of you to your gate, where you'll board your flight and never set foot on a Pinnacle Airways aircraft again." Victoria's eyes widened with shock. "You can't ban me from flying. I'm a platinum-level passenger," were Michael corrected. "You were a platinum passenger. Now you're a liability. Your status is permanently revoked. You're banned from all Pinnacle Airways flights. Corporate security has your photographs and will ensure this ban is enforced." The crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Applause broke out across the terminal area. Cheers echoed from multiple gates. Even airport workers were clapping. James Rodriguez's live stream exploded with celebratory comments and heart emojis. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes for the first time since the confrontation began. Not from sadness or humiliation, but from relief and vindication. The CEO of her airline had just publicly defended her reputation and validated her achievements in the most dramatic way possible. Michael turned to Maya with a completely different expression. Warm, respectful, proud. "Captain, I apologize that you had to endure this treatment. It's completely unacceptable, and it ends today." "Thank you, sir," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the emotion she felt. "Your support means everything to me." "You've earned that support through 15 years of exceptional service. And now, if I'm not mistaken, you have a flight to Los Angeles and then a prestigious route to Paris. 300 passengers are counting on you." Maya smiled for the first time in over an hour. "Yes, sir. I do." Michael nodded to the corporate security team. "Escort Captain Thompson to her gate with full honors. Make sure she has everything she needs for her flights." He turned to Brad Mitchell and Carmen Rodriguez. "You two will be meeting with HR tomorrow morning. Your handling of this situation was completely inadequate." As Victoria and Jennifer were escorted away by security, the crowd began to disperse, but many passengers stopped to shake Maya's hand or express their support. The viral video had reached millions of viewers. News outlets were calling for interviews. Civil rights organizations were issuing statements. But for Maya Thompson, the most important thing was that she could finally check in for her flight and continue doing the job she loved, safely transporting passengers while representing excellence in aviation. The battle for her dignity had been won in the most public and dramatic way possible. Within minutes of Michael Harrison's public confrontation with Victoria Blackwood, corporate communications at Pinnacle Airways was in full crisis management mode. The viral video had reached over 2 million views. News outlets were calling for statements. Social media was exploding with commentary. The company's stock price was fluctuating as investors tried to understand the implications of a discrimination incident that had played out so publicly. Victoria Blackwood's downfall was swift and merciless. Corporate security escorted her and Jennifer Walsh to their departure gate under the eyes of hundreds of passengers and dozens of recording devices. Her platinum status was immediately revoked from all airline loyalty programs through industry databases that shared passenger information. Her name was flagged in reservation channels as persona non grata, but the consequences extended far beyond airline travel. Victoria's husband Marcus received urgent calls from business partners who'd seen the viral video. His investment banking firm, already struggling with declining revenues, faced immediate client inquiries about his wife's racist behavior. 3 major clients canceled meetings scheduled for the following week. 2 others requested new account managers who weren't associated with the Blackwood family. By evening, Marcus would receive an ultimatum from his business partners: distance yourself from the controversy or find another firm. Victoria's public meltdown had made them both toxic in their professional and social circles. Jennifer Walsh, caught on camera supporting Victoria's racist accusations, faced her own consequences. Her employer, a prominent Atlanta law firm, received dozens of calls and emails from potential clients who'd seen the video. The firm's diversity committee called an emergency meeting. By Friday afternoon, Jennifer would be informed that her partnership track had been suspended pending a full review of her conduct and its impact on the firm's reputation. Brad Mitchell and Carmen Rodriguez were summoned to emergency meetings with human resources and corporate management. Brad's 8-year tenure with the company couldn't protect him from the obvious failure to handle the discrimination properly. His termination for cause was processed within 24 hours. His pension and benefits were affected by the misconduct determination. Carmen received a formal reprimand and mandatory bias training, but kept her job after reviewing the security footage showed she had followed procedures correctly and expressed discomfort with the extended verification process. She would eventually become an advocate for respectful treatment of all crew members and passengers. Michael Harrison didn't hide from the crisis. Instead, he leaned into it with the same directness he'd shown at the terminal. Within 4 hours of the confrontation, he released a comprehensive statement that named Victoria Blackwood specifically and detailed her immediate ban from all airline services. Discrimination against our crew members is discrimination against our values, Harrison stated in a video message posted to all company social media accounts. Captain Maya Thompson represents the highest standards of our profession. The treatment she received today was unacceptable, and we've taken immediate action to ensure it never happens again. The statement included Maya's official service record with her permission: 15 years with Pinnacle Airways, over 12,000 flight hours, 0 safety violations, commendations from the FAA for exceptional airmanship, featured instructor in the company's advanced training programs. The documentation made Victoria's accusations look even more absurd in retrospect. Harrison announced the immediate implementation of the Thompson Protocol, a company-wide training program on bias awareness and crew support. Every employee would participate in mandatory education about recognizing and preventing discrimination. Anonymous reporting channels would be enhanced. Diversity targets would be established for management positions. But Harrison went further than corporate policy changes. He announced that Maya Thompson was being promoted to Director of Crew Relations and Equality, a new executive position with authority to implement comprehensive reforms across all airline operations. The aviation industry took notice immediately. Other airline CEOs faced questions about their own diversity practices and anti-discrimination policies. The Airline Pilots Association issued a statement supporting Maya and condemning racial bias in aviation. The FAA announced a review of industry-wide practices regarding crew treatment and passenger behavior. Maya's story became a watershed moment for diversity in aviation. Flight training schools reported increased enrollment from minority students who'd been inspired by her example. Young black women across the country tagged her in social media posts about pursuing pilot careers. The personal cost to Victoria was devastating and permanent. The viral video followed her everywhere. Restaurant reservations were canceled when management recognized her name. Charity boards asked her to resign to avoid controversy. Even her country club membership was terminated after other members complained about the negative publicity. Victoria's attempts to rehabilitate her image through apology statements and claims that she'd been misunderstood fell flat. The video evidence was too clear. Her words were too explicit. The damage to her reputation was irreversible. Marcus Blackwood filed for divorce within 6 months, citing the destruction of his business relationships and professional reputation. The settlement left Victoria with significantly reduced circumstances. She was forced to sell their Charleston mansion and relocate to a smaller city where her notoriety was less pronounced. Meanwhile, Maya Thompson became a quiet icon in the aviation community. She declined most interview requests, preferring to let her flying speak for itself. But when she did speak publicly, she emphasized the importance of merit-based advancement and the need for changes to prevent other qualified professionals from facing similar discrimination. The Thompson Protocol became a model for other airlines. Within 2 years, every major carrier had implemented similar anti-discrimination training and reporting mechanisms. The protocol was credited with improving crew morale and reducing passenger complaints related to bias incidents. James Rodriguez's live stream of the confrontation became one of the most watched examples of discrimination being publicly defeated. He donated the advertising revenue from the viral video to scholarship funds for minority students pursuing aviation careers. Lisa Parker, the retired teacher who defended Maya, received recognition from civil rights organizations for her courage in speaking up against injustice. She became a volunteer advocate for workplace discrimination victims. Robert Martinez was promoted to crew manager partly due to his principled support for Maya during the confrontation. He implemented new training programs for flight attendants on recognizing and reporting discrimination against crew members. The security officers who'd handled the situation professionally received commendations for their calm and fair treatment of everyone involved. Their body camera footage became training material for handling discrimination complaints at airports nationwide. Carmen Rodriguez eventually became one of Maya's strongest allies in implementing the Thompson Protocol. Her experience during the confrontation made her passionate about preventing other employees from being caught between proper procedures and discriminatory pressure from passengers. But perhaps the most significant consequence was the message sent throughout the aviation industry. Discrimination against qualified professionals would have severe and public consequences. The days of quietly tolerating bias in the name of customer service were ending. Maya Thompson had won more than vindication for herself. She'd won recognition that excellence in aviation came in many forms, and that protecting qualified professionals from discrimination was everyone's responsibility. The viral video would be studied in business schools as an example of crisis management done right. Michael Harrison's immediate public support for his employee became a model for corporate leadership in discrimination situations. Within a year, Pinnacle Airways would be recognized as an industry leader in diversity and inclusion. Their stock price recovered and exceeded pre-incident levels. Customer satisfaction scores improved as the company's commitment to equality attracted passengers who wanted to support inclusive business practices. Victoria Blackwood had intended to humiliate Maya Thompson and assert her own privilege. Instead, she'd triggered a transformation that made aviation more welcoming for qualified professionals of all backgrounds. The consequences of her racist accusations would follow her forever, while Maya Thompson continued to fly to excel and to inspire others to reach for their own dreams of flight. 6 months after the confrontation at Atlanta International Airport, the Thompson Protocol had been implemented across every Pinnacle Airways location in North America and Europe. The comprehensive anti-discrimination program included mandatory bias training for all employees, enhanced reporting mechanisms for incidents, and specific protections for crew members facing passenger discrimination. Maya Thompson's new role as Director of Crew Relations and Equality gave her authority to investigate incidents, recommend policy changes, and ensure that no airline employee would face the humiliation she'd endured. Her office received dozens of reports in the first month indicating that discrimination had been a widespread but hidden problem throughout the industry. Other airlines quickly adopted similar programs after seeing the positive publicity and improved employee satisfaction that Pinnacle Airways achieved. The Thompson Protocol became an industry standard referenced in federal aviation regulations and cited by civil rights organizations as a model for corporate anti-discrimination policies. Maya testified before a congressional aviation subcommittee about bias in the airline industry. Her calm, professional presentation of the facts, supported by video evidence from James Rodriguez's live stream, convinced lawmakers to include anti-discrimination requirements in federal aviation funding bills. The Federal Aviation Administration created new guidelines for airport security personnel on handling discrimination complaints. Training programs were enhanced to recognize the difference between legitimate security concerns and bias-driven questioning of qualified professionals. Victoria Blackwood's exile from her former social circles became permanent. Her name remained associated with the viral video that had exposed her racism so publicly. Employment opportunities dried up as background checks revealed her internet notoriety. She eventually moved to a remote area where her past was less likely to be recognized. Marcus Blackwood's business never recovered from the association with his ex-wife's behavior. He was forced to dissolve his investment firm and take a junior position with another company in a different city. The divorce settlement and business losses left him with a fraction of his former wealth. Jennifer Walsh left the legal profession after her law firm made it clear that her partnership prospects were permanently damaged. She relocated to another state and found work in a non-client-facing position with a small business. The ripple effects of Maya's vindication spread far beyond aviation. Business schools taught case studies about the incident as an example of how quickly discrimination could become a public relations crisis in the social media age. Corporate diversity training programs used the video as a teaching tool. Young people across the country were inspired by Maya's example. Flight training schools reported significant increases in minority enrollment. Organizations dedicated to promoting diversity in aviation credited the Thompson incident with raising awareness about opportunities in the field. Maya continued to fly her regular routes while fulfilling her new executive responsibilities. She established mentorship programs for minority pilots and created partnerships with historically black colleges and universities to recruit aviation students. The industry recognition that followed validated everything Maya had worked to achieve. She received the FAA's Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award, the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals Lifetime Achievement Award, and was inducted into the Women in Aviation International Pioneer Hall of Fame. But for Maya, the most meaningful recognition came from colleagues and passengers who understood that her dignity under attack had represented something larger than one person's experience. She'd stood for every qualified professional who'd been questioned based on appearance rather than ability. 2 years after the confrontation, Maya was selected to captain the inaugural flight of Pinnacle Airways' new route to Lagos, Nigeria. The symbolic significance was enormous. A route to Africa commanded by an African-American woman who'd overcome discrimination to reach the pinnacle of her profession. The send-off ceremony at Atlanta International Airport was attended by hundreds of aviation professionals, civil rights leaders, and passengers who'd been inspired by her story. Michael Harrison spoke about how Maya's courage had transformed not just their airline, but the entire industry. When Maya walked through the terminal toward her aircraft, she passed the exact spot where Victoria Blackwood had accused her of fraud. Now passengers recognized her and applauded spontaneously. Gate agents smiled and nodded respectfully. Young black girls approached with their parents asking for photos with the captain they'd seen on the news. One 8-year-old girl clutching a toy airplane looked up at Maya with wide eyes. "Are you really a pilot?" Maya knelt to the child's level, just as someone had done for her when she was young and dreaming of flight. "I am. And if you want to be a pilot too, you can be. The sky belongs to everyone brave enough to reach for it." The child's mother thanked Maya tearfully. "You've shown her that she can be anything she wants to be." As Maya boarded her aircraft for the historic flight to Lagos, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The discrimination at the check-in counter had been painful, but it had also become a catalyst for changes that would benefit countless others. In the cockpit of her Boeing 787, preparing for takeoff from the same Atlanta terminal where her integrity had been attacked, Maya felt the weight of history and hope. Her radio crackled with the familiar voice of air traffic control. "Pinnacle 892, this is Atlanta Tower. Captain Thompson, it's an honor to clear you for takeoff on this historic route. Have a safe flight." Maya smiled as she pushed the throttles forward, feeling the aircraft respond with the power that would carry her and 300 passengers safely across the Atlantic. Atlanta Tower. This is Captain Thompson. Thank you for the kind words. Pinnacle 892 is ready for takeoff. As the 777 climbed through 10,000 feet, Maya looked down at the terminal where her battle had been fought and won. She thought about Victoria Blackwood, a woman so consumed by prejudice that she'd missed the opportunity to witness true excellence in action. Then Maya turned her attention forward, focusing on the flight ahead and the passengers who trusted her with their lives. Below, the lights of Atlanta faded into the distance as she climbed toward 40,000 feet, leaving the smallness of prejudice far below, and heading toward a horizon where merit and skill mattered more than the color of her skin. Maya Thompson had proven that authority comes not from appearance, but from competence. That dignity can withstand any attack when it's built on genuine achievement, and that one person's courage to stand up against injustice can change an entire industry. 6 months later, at the annual Pinnacle Airways Employee Recognition Ceremony, Maya received a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. But the tribute that meant the most to her came from a young Hispanic pilot who'd recently been hired by the company. Captain Thompson. The young woman said, "I want you to know that I'm here because you showed me it was possible. When I saw how you handled that situation with such grace and professionalism, I knew that this industry had room for people like us." Maya smiled, remembering her own young dreams and the obstacles that had once seemed insurmountable. The industry has always had room for excellence. Sometimes it just takes time for people to recognize it when it doesn't look like what they expect. The transformation that began with one woman's racist accusations at a check-in counter had become a movement that opened doors throughout aviation. Maya Thompson's victory belonged not just to her, but to every qualified professional who would follow in her contrail. What did you think of Maya's incredible strength under pressure? Have you ever witnessed discrimination being defeated by dignity and excellence? Share your thoughts below. We read every comment and appreciate your support. For more stories of justice prevailing and professionals overcoming bias through merit and determination, subscribe to our channel. Your engagement helps us tell these important stories that remind us all, respect isn't given based on appearance but earned through character and competence. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of real-life justice. Together, we can make sure that stories like Maya's continue to inspire and create positive change. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.